Recording in progress.
Okay. All right, I'd like to call the meeting in order. I want to thank everyone for attending today as we work through our many projects. First order of business is approval of the minutes from July 11th. Does anyone had an opportunity to read them? I assume so. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion second. Any changes or discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Garrett?
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Horvath?
Aye.
Mr. Pyle? Aye. Mr. Goble?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Shalio, or is it Mr. Fotia?
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Fotia to talk about financial matters.
Good morning. Before you is a report of the summary balances by fund for the month of July. And then to provide some historical context, the next several pages have to do with how much each of our economic development areas have been bringing in since 2018 to current. So we get our disbursements twice a year after the spring and fall property taxes are collected. Then the auditor does the disbursement to us usually at the end of June and the end of December. And that's what this graph shows, so you can track how each of our economic development areas are doing and how we're capturing that increment. And then the subsequent pages, that quietus report is just showing what the deposit was each of those settlement dates, so you can see each twice a year how much they get in. Secondly then, if there are, before I move on, are there any questions on any of those reports? Hearing none. Then I will mention resolution number 2023-11 is a transfers and appropriations bill after we got our settlement from the spring tax payments this year. What this resolution does is puts most of our available funds in accounts that would enable us to be able to contract out with your permission, but without having to come back then for an additional appropriation. And all appropriations, unless they're tied to a specific contract, do expire at the end of the year, and we would have to come back in January and ask for the appropriation again.
And since it's August when we budget in the beginning of the year, most of these follow the budget. Of course, there's always going to be things that change a bit.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 2023-11?
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Just so I understand, we're moving money into its related accounts, and the use is this top description here in each category?
Correct. So the letters are the fund it is, which economic development area, and then the names. So for instance, under DAM general, that string of numbers is the account, and then we have the amount being put in each account there.
Okay.
I would note real quick, just if you look at the first page, under transfers, the C category, there's a new fund that we created. It's called the GM Flex Fund. As part of the development agreement, there's $1 million that's in the development agreement that GM can use for various items. So it's kind of an undefined $1 million that they can use for site demolition, site prep, additional engineering contracts, things like that. Before that $1 million got lost, that $1 million is coming from the New Carlisle Economic Development Area funds. But just in the event that we ended up spending money out of that and reduced accidentally to a point less than $1 million, we want to make sure that $1 million was protected over the life of the development agreement. So that's why a new fund was created. That's why that money's going to move, and it's going to sit in kind of a different, kind of a separate pot. just so it's protected. The other thing I would note too, especially in the New Carlisle Economic Development Areas 1 and 2, one of the things that we're gonna have to do with the GM project is buy some materials ahead of time. So do early procurement. We may even have to do some additional work. I mean, we're already doing contracting services, things like that, but there may be some additional things that we need to bid. Additionally, because we'd like to do a non-taxable bond, there may be some taxable items that we need to pay for that would change the complexion of the bond. So we wanted to make sure we appropriated all the cash we had on hand that hadn't been appropriated, so we could do some of those things before the end of the calendar year. So that's why there's a lot of money going into economic development, in both of those categories, just to get money so that it's fungible, so that we can use it when it's needed. I'm trying to think, is there anything else?
I would mention that 2023 special projects name general is the sidewalk extension project that was approved a few meetings ago. So we're just creating a separate account to pay that out of.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, we have a motion to second. Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Lane, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Horvath?
Aye.
Mr. File? Aye. Mr. Vogel?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Professional service agreement?
Yep, so in the New Carlisle Economic Development Area, one of the things we started doing in 2022 was creating on-call service agreements with a couple different engineering firms. We've used Lawson Fisher Associates on call, as well as Christopher Burke Engineering. And there's just things, especially with the GM project, that just come up that have to be addressed. And instead of coming through, creating a contract just for a limited scope of work, sometimes it's nice just to have a kind of a line item, if you will, that we can just go to. This will be the third on-call services agreement with Lawson Fisher at $75,000. There's a scope of work on the page after the signature page, so I guess it'd be kind of the first page, if you will. There are a lot of things specifically that we're finding related to right-of-way dedication on State Road 2. So as the plat gets prepared, a lot of right-of-way service work has to be done. There's utility coordination. There's been some work specifically on the Sebasti Farms property that's needed to be researched and done. So there's just a lot of things that, it's hard to write a big contract for. So these are 7 or 8 items that we've used. Some of these are old items that just continue. Some of these are new items. So I would just ask for your support in approving this on-call agreement.
And the 75,000 is roughly what we've approved in the past, is it not?
It is exactly what we've approved with the last 2. That's correct.
It's all based on the rate sheet here?
It
As far
is.
as how they use it?
Yep, that's correct.
Is it tied to a particular site, or is it several?
So while we're approving it under the New Carlisle Economic Development Area, in the event that we had work that needed to be done in one of our other development areas, we'd specifically pay for it out of that development area. But I would believe largely the work that will be done here will be likely 100% out of New Carlisle. So that's why we're putting it under that category.
Is there a motion to approve the agreement?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? No, hearing none. Mr. Garrett?
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Horvath?
Aye.
Mr. File?
Aye.
Mr. Vogel?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Move on to AM, General Economic Area.
So the next 2 agreements really are things that we've been working on for a number of years. And so we'll start first with the Douglas Road widening project proposal here in the packet. So over the last several years, we've been looking at Douglas Road from Capitol Avenue west to the Mishawaka city limits. And the Mishawaka city limits really just start just to the west of the Canadian National Tract. So we're really looking at a very small distance of property. About 3,500 feet from Capitol to Mishawaka city limits. One of the challenges we have is we've just got to figure out how to make that road section and improve to a level that meets the rest of the corridor. So from Mishawaka city limits west all the way to State Road 933, we will have a 5-lane section of road to carry all the way through the commercial corridors, all the way through the Notre Dame campus area and west to 933. So this 3,500 feet is a little bit of an anomaly in the corridor. And again, it's even more complicated because it's likely at some point going to be part of City of Mishawaka, but Mishawaka hasn't gotten to a point where it's annexed far enough east yet to Capitol Avenue. So how do we deal with it, and what are the constraints? And so one of the things we've done over the last several years is look to see how we can make this corridor work as is, but then ultimately, at the tracks, does it deserve just a regular at-grade crossing? Does it deserve an overpass? What are the opportunities at that point? A couple years ago, back in 2021, we applied for a state grant through the local tracks grant program. This is a grant program administered through NDOT, where we actually applied to improve that section of road with an overpass. It would have been a 5-lane overpass. At that time, we lost out on that grant application, but we did a lot of work, we did a lot of base work to really understand the opportunities to make improvements in that corridor happen. That work that we did then helped us as we looked at property acquisition. We've now bought 2 properties on the south side of south side of Douglas Road, east of the tracks. The first property and the third property, both were opportunity acquisitions. First one was available because it was vacant. The third one was over and available because it was for sale. So properties that we knew if we ever did either an at-grade crossing or an above-grade crossing, we'd have to acquire. The other piece of this work ultimately that will be a benefit is as we look at Mishawaka building its water treatment plant at Jude Creek, there's the opportunity to extend water long-term over to the Capitol Avenue corridor area. So east of Capitol Avenue, as we look at Capitol Avenue to Bittersweet, the toll road south to Day Road, there's a huge area for future development, and that's kind of what the second proposal relates to. So the second half of this proposal, the Douglas Road proposal, would not only look at the widening, but also what it will take to extend utilities through that corridor. So this is really a long-term double piece of infrastructure, so road and utility connections. So if you looked at the proposal, it's a 13-step plan to get from where we are today to construction of a new road. All we're asking for is your approval of the first phase, which is the conceptual corridor improvement study. That'll look at the right-of-way, that'll look at utility pieces, that'll look at other constraints and then start to put some design to that roadway corridor. So we're asking for your approval of the conceptual corridor improvement study. It's a lump sum contract amount of $97,420. Lawson Fisher has been working on this project. Lawson Fisher is also Mishawaka's prime engineer doing all the improvements in Veterans Parkway on the Mishawaka section of Douglas Road. So there's a lot of reasons why it makes a lot of sense to continue that contractor doing this work. Lawson Fisher was also the firm that worked with us as we applied for the local tracks grant. So again, a lot of the base data that they prepared then will be applicable to this work. So staff would ask for your approval of this proposal, please.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion items?
Just, I assume this is a typical, but any information they generate is property of your office, right?
That's correct.
So if down the road, there was somebody else wanted to do this kind of work, they could pick right up with what was
Yeah,
generated previously.
and so we may get to a point in this work where we apply for federal money or we do something else. And so we might have to go through the federal procurement process where we'd have to do an RFP for work. So, yeah, the work would get to a point and then that work could be used to supplement, a different firm if that's how the work was procured.
So there is a specific paragraph in the agreement that says that anything they prepare plans are our property.
Yeah, I had read that in the on-demand agreement. I didn't get a chance to read this one.
Any other questions or Comments? Hearing none. Mr. Garrett?
Mr. Lane, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Horvath?
Aye.
Mr. Cloud?
Aye.
Mr. Goble?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
So the second half of this is a project really that's kind of long in the making. So over the last several years, we've been doing a lot of kind of pre-development work, if you will, in the Capitol Avenue corridor. Whether it's been work on Douglas Road or work on a two-county study to look at traffic circulation and development patterns between Elkhart County and St. Joe County, whether it's the Capitol Avenue Bikeway Corridor, or whether it's the Northeast Trunk Sewer Study looking at bringing sewer up Capitol Avenue to look at development opportunities. Capitol Avenue is really kind of that next area. Could compare it to some level to the work that we've done in the Indiana Enterprise Center, but it really is kind of a different scale. We're looking at about 4,000 acres here, bounded on the north by the toll road, south to Day Road, west to Capitol Avenue, and maybe even a little into that Douglas Road corridor we just talked about, and then east to Buckeye. So Buckeye is just the first major road east of Bittersweet. So as we look at that 4,000 acre area, what are the opportunities for development? What are our utility conditions? What are our development patterns? Much like the IEC, there's lots of properties. There's big properties out there. So it's 100-acre parcels, bigger properties, a lot of common ownership. So there really are some development opportunities. We've got a couple situations right now with prospects looking at the IEC that are looking for second locations in St. Joe County, and this would be a great place to put some of those users, clean users, high-power users, good utility users, and users that would need access to the toll road and the road network, but we don't really know a lot about Capitol Avenue. I mean, we know it's there, but kind of like we were in 2017 with the IEC. We know it's a good site, but we just don't know what we can do with it. So what we're proposing to do is start a process, much like we did with the IEC Area Management Plan, very similar process, but a little higher level. We learned a lot with the IEC plan that, you know, we got a lot of good information. We spent a lot of time and energy, brought in a lot of consultants, and got a lot of great information. That served us well. I mean, that served us well with the GM project. That's going to serve us well with a couple other prospects that we're working on right now. But I don't know that we need that level of detail in this. It's a smaller area, a little bit more confined. So what we'd like to do is do a similar study, and then we propose to break it up into two phases. So the first phase would be project management, existing conditions review, and kind of the economic development analysis. I think it's a good site. It's a big site, big land, big power, big utilities, things like that. But we want to do put some actual economic development analysis into it to make sure it really is a good site. And then the second phase, once we complete the first phase, would be marketing and branding, and then some of the packaging, and then ultimately the completion of the master plan. So what we'd like to do today is ask for your approval of the first phase. First phase would be in the total of $215,000. And what we'd like to do is use the Antero Group. And the Antero Group was the group that did the IEC Area Management Plan. So they understand what we're looking for. They have the contacts, they've got a lot of the resources, and they've got a lot of the economic development analysis data that was used when they prepared that plan, and also the airport plan as we looked at the southwest quadrant to the airport. So we'd like to ask for your approval of this proposal today to start that process. We think I think this is Capitol Avenue corridor is one of those untapped areas. I think there's great opportunity. There was a lot of promise when the Hummer plant came in that there was going to be all this development, all these suppliers were going to come to town, and it didn't really materialize at the level that was expected. And I think a lot of that is just because the community wasn't prepared for the opportunities. What we'd like to do is prepare this part of the county, much like we've done on the west side of the county, for development opportunities. I would also note, too, that, again, we have an economic development area south of there. The AM General Economic Development Area would sit south of this area. As we look to do some expansion of that economic development area, those TIF districts, maybe later this year, early next year, opens up some opportunity, too, to maybe look at a little different focus, too, as we look at new tools using residential TIF and some of the other tools that are now in the toolbox, to maybe look at this area a little bit more holistically. So we think this plan would be a good step towards that, and again, just ask for your approval.
The price of $215,000 will be paid for out of
The AM General Economic Development Area.
I assumed as much.
Is it appropriate to ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Wasn't-
No, absolutely.
Sorry, I'm still a little bit new. So the capital extension, that's been developed for some time. Do we have an existing understanding of the capacity? You talk about big power, but I'm talking about utilities overall, how that ties into Mishawaka, or I don't know if any of that feeds to Elkhart, but do we have an existing understanding of overall utility capacity with all that traffic availability? Traffic's there, but
Yeah, so that's part of what this work will do. This will pull in NIPSCO gas, this will pull in and coordinate with AEP in particular. AEP is really kind of the major factor here. Because we're doing the study with Lawson Fisher already on the sewer and building the Northeast Gateway Sewer Study, that's taking care of the sewer component of the study. And then because Mishawaka is just completing its water treatment plant study, DLZ is doing that work, we've got the ability to draw in information on that project. So it really is just pulling in gas, electric, and just coordinating on the sewer and the water. The other piece of this too that I think opens up some opportunities, Elkhart and Western Railroad, we've done a lot of work and had a lot of conversation about Elkhart and Western Railroad. They run basically along McKinley from Current east into Elkhart County. What they'd like to do long-term is look at extending their line west and north, more north than west, all the way up to Canadian National, so that Elkhart and Western Railroad could connect into the Robert Young Yards on the east end and Canadian National on the west. And so looking at the opportunity for dual-serve rail sites. We've had prospects over the last year that looked for dual-served rail sites by two Class 1s. We don't have it in the IEC. While we've got rail, it would take a lot to connect Canadian National that runs 3.5 miles south of State Road 2 to Norfolk Southern. This may be an opportunity, again, from an industrial perspective, to look at some prospects that maybe would be a different fit for this area. So rail will also be a component of this study too, as it is looked at. The last thing that'll be a piece of this too is just capacity of the existing Capitol Avenue. We know that it's 4 lanes, it's got the ability to be expanded to 6 lanes the way it was built, and it's got connectivity to toll road on the north and to bypass on the south. So what are its opportunities to feed and serve? And so that's where the economic development analysis plays in too. What are the opportunities we're missing because, or what areas and target markets could we expand into because of those opportunities? So this really is a coordinating document, this first phase more than anything else, pulling all that data. AEP says, wow, we got lots of power lines running through here, but yeah, can you just tap into the power line? There's got to be a little more understanding than that, so.
what's the timeline to having this completed?
So I believe the first phase, there was a timeline section in the back. So I'll tell you, I don't see it right off. I'm going to tell you it's going to take at least 6 months to get the majority of the core of that information gathered between meeting with the utilities and meeting with some of the other groups. I'm going to say at least 6 months to get through that. But I think when we have that, when we have the first phase, we can take a look at that and see, how we package it. And we may find that we have enough information, we don't need to do the second phase, or we may need to pivot a little bit and do additional research, so.
There was a joint study with Elkhart and entities, Elkhart and South Bend on connecting to Elkhart. Is that at all touched on in this plan?
Yeah, so they'll be able to use that documentation, that research to meld into this. So we really don't need to look at traffic routing and traffic patterns because we have all that from other study. And again, that's kind of the benefit. The first time this corridor was studied was DLZ did a land use plan for this area in 2003. That was before the bypass went all the way, or the Capitol Avenue went all the way to the bypass. That was before, I think in that study, they were still talking about interchanges at each of the major points. And those that are from the area remember when I think it was at Douglas, where they had started building the interchange and then pulled it out and then put it all back to grade. So, a lot of things have happened since 2003 with the original study. So it certainly is time. And certainly with the prospect opportunity we were seeing out west, that there's the opportunity to bring those to the east to supplement the eastern part of the county. This is a good time to do this work.
And there also could be a residential component here. It's,
Certainly, yeah, as
Many-
we look at
multiple
land use.
use.
Yeah, and I would touch, and I would tie it all together by saying all the work that's gonna be done here is gonna tie into the work being done on the comprehensive plan. So it's all gonna coordinate with the work being done on the comp plan so that it all fits and combines in together, so.
is there a motion to approve the agreement?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Second. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Garrett?
Motion and second, Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Horvath?
Aye.
Mr. Potts? Aye. Mr. Goble?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Move on to resolution 2023-12.
Yeah, Resolution 2023-12 is a funding resolution, and I guess by way of a little history, back in 2018, the Redevelopment Commission started looking at development opportunities in the AM General area, looking more specifically around AM General. As we were working with SF Motors and some of the other prospects at the H2 plant, one of the big concerns was the opportunity for storage buildings, more warehouse buildings. One of the challenges we have in this corridor is there wasn't a lot of opportunity at the time. There's just not a lot of big land parcels immediately in that corridor to do development. So we had worked with PHM Schools and some other partners to look at a land parcel at the northwest corner of Bittersweet and McKinley. In the course of that work, we started working with Penn Township Fire Station, who ultimately ended up building a fire station just west of Candace Drive on McKinley. As part of that work, they needed to extend a water line, so we worked with the city of Mishawaka to extend water to the fire station site. But ultimately, the plan was to take that water line to build a redundant water loop in coordination with Mishawaka all the way to Bittersweet. So Evergreen Drive is where the water ended. We needed to get it all the way to Bittersweet. So what's before you today is the funding resolution request to fund the purchase of the easements for the last three parcels. So parcels 1, 2, and 3. And there's a map in the packet, and they're identified as green parcels. There's a gas station, there's a commercial site, and then there's a house that make up the three properties east of Candace Lane. Because the appraisals had staled, they'd sat for a period of years, we thought it was appropriate to get new appraisals. The change in amount to the appraisals from the prior appraisals to the current number is $2,535. So what we need to do is go back and reset the budget. So we're asking for your approval of a resolution to add the appropriate amount of funds so that we can purchase the three easements that need to be purchased under Phase 2. We still have one easement in the Phase 1 section that needs to be acquired. The water line's been installed, but we have a property owner that's fun to deal with, but doesn't like to sign the paperwork. And so we're still working on that. So that's why the documentation says 4 easements, but really it's through. We've got to pay for that one and then get these 3 new additional easements. I would tell you, if you look at the map in the packet, one of the things that's really been interesting about this corridor is there has been a lot of proposed or new development in the corridor. A new building on the northeast corner of Evergreen and McKinley. There's a proposed commercial restaurant just west of the gas station at McKinley and Bittersweet. And then 2 new buildings are proposed for Evergreen Plaza Drive. Hopefully the first one will be under construction yet this year. So we're seeing a lot of small infill development, and it's nice because it's all in the TIF district or all in the EDA, so we're getting the benefit of that. And to this date, knock on wood, no request for abatement. So it's money that, as it gets assessed, will go straight into the pot without any tax relief. I would also tell you, Terry's working on a tax abatement just west of the word existing water main, or that block with Max Plastics. That's a plastic company that has taken over the old United Conveyor building. Just across the street is AM General, where they're doing a major expansion for the JLTV project. So a lot of development in this corridor. So the opportunity to build this little section of water line in coordination with Mishawaka really plays well, and it's a good utility piece. So any questions, I would be happy to answer.
North of these, of the plastics and AM General, isn't there some open land that has access to a rail line that could be developed down the road? Would this water would this help at all in that those endeavors?
So there is a parcel, about a 28-acre parcel. If you look at the map, there's a nice wooded 28-acre parcel owned by PHM Schools. PHM Schools is not interested in selling that. We've kind of been round and round a couple times with them. There was also a commercial or a industrial development prospect on the north side of the tracks along Bittersweet that had looked at doing an industrial development there. Ran into a little bit of rezoning challenge from the neighbors, so that likely won't go there. Again, that's part of the problem with this corridor is there's we've got a great asset with utilities and a great asset with the rail, but there's not a lot of developable sites to make things work. So where we can make these things work, we're trying to do that. I will say the new proposed commercial development near McKinley and Bittersweet will be a nice addition to the restaurant scene in that corridor. We're excited when that kicks off to see that project
So
happen.
PHM is not interested in selling at this time?
Not presently interested in this time in selling, so maybe at some point they will, but I think they, like everybody else that has land constraints, is gonna hold on to land as long as it can. This is adjacent, it's got a new entry drive to it, it's got utilities, so if they ever had to do some kind of school project, or parking, or sports fields, or whatever, there's at least an opportunity there. I believe this is where they're gonna put their Quidditch fields at some point, when it comes time to do that, so.
Who wouldn't want it there?
Exactly, so.
Okay. So essentially, this is a resolution for $2,535 addition.
It is, yeah,
Just something
and
we've
and ultimately, it's kind of a refresh too,
Correct.
just asking for kind of a refresh of the whole project. I think, Dennis, you're the only one that's been here when this originally got kicked off, so.
Is there a motion to approve Resolution 2023-12?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
A motion and a second, Mr. Lane,
Aye.
Mr. Horvath,
Aye.
Mr. Pyle,
Aye.
Mr. Goble,
Aye.
and Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
And then, there's no updates on Wyatt, Northwest Cleveland, or the solar project?
No, they're not. The only other thing is an item under additional business. For the last several years, we've been receiving a $1,000 donation to the Economic Development Office, Redevelopment Commission, and that money has been coming from the Business Development Corporation. The BDC is an organization that helps work with business development opportunities in small towns and the big towns all across northern Indiana, southern Michigan. Business Development Corporation's been around since, it's probably almost 20 years now, I would say.
2000.
Yeah, so you did work, Terry, when he was with City of South Bend, did work when the BDC was under City of South Bend umbrella before they went private. So we think this is a great partnership. We've used this money in the past to work with some of the small towns. We put the money into our general redevelopment fund as kind of a nice little place where we put the money so that, if we have a project comes up, we need to do a study. We've done some work with Lakeville. We've done a couple other small little projects. But it's just it's nice recognition that we're doing good things, and BDC obviously is doing some great things. They do a lot of loan programs, again, that benefit a lot of the businesses in our area. So what I'd ask is that Dennis, you as the president, and maybe the two of us sign a thank you letter that we send, again, just that we do that. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer it about that.
All right, thank you. A couple things, just because we have time, quick updates. One, you mentioned the comprehensive plan earlier, just a real quick update of where we're at. And also, you have amassed a list of all the county-owned properties. Well, you never know if it's final because you keep finding a few, but I know there's been meetings to possibly sell them, certain ones, use them for other purposes, et cetera. Wonder if you could just have a quick update.
So we'll start with the comp plan. So I think the comp plan has reached a point where we've got a draft of all the different pillars of the document itself. I think, I know that Abby Wiles and her team are reviewing the draft, trying to understand, make sure it's got everything in it that it needs to have in it, if there's any additional. But I think we're at a point where it's gonna take a little additional work to get it across the finish line, so there's some internal conversations about how to get that done, whether it's additional funding or just what the process process looks like. I think the goal is to get it done before the end of the year. And again, as we do stuff in the IEC, have some prospect opportunities out there, we want to make sure those maps coordinate, and certainly this work in Capitol Avenue, make sure all those coordinate. As far as counting on properties, Frank, do you want to talk about the land bank project and maybe just give a brief update on that real quick?
Sure. So the city of South Bend engaged the Center for Community Progress to do a study into the feasibility of whether or not it made sense for St. Joseph County and the city of South Bend to work together on establishing a land bank, which would be basically creating or giving authority to an entity we could transfer county land to. This most of this land, if not all of this land that we're talking about, came to the county by way of defaults on property taxes. And then if the property fails to sell on the tax sale and the certificate sale, then it falls to the county to maintain. A lot of these are vacant properties, parcels within the city limits of South Bend, and trying to find a way that we can maybe get them back into productive use. So they have completed their initial study and are coming back next Friday, in fact, this Friday, to meet with representatives from the city and the county to talk about next steps and the results of their proposal. So there should be more information coming after
And certainly
this
by
week.
the end of the year, you'd have an update. Okay. All right, thank you. Any other additional business? Okay, we move to the public comment. If anyone would like to speak, you certainly have a 3-minute limit. Please give your name and address. Anyone online as well? Okay. Right. Not having anyone approach the podium or signify online that they're interested, I would accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Lane?
Aye.
Mr. Horvath?
Aye.
Mr. Pyle? Aye. Mr. Goble?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.